I'm Dean Shelley Smith-Acuna of the Graduate School of Professional Psychology, the home of the Center for Oncology Psychology Excellence, and you're going to hear a lot about our really wonderful efforts in this program, the specialty training tonight. Probably all of you here are touched by cancer in one way or another, whether you're a survivor, whether you're a caregiver, have a family member involved. I know for myself, my mom has been dealing with ovarian cancer for 5 years, and on the one hand, that's kind of a miracle in and of itself that she's plugging along, and I'm so grateful for all of the wonderful medical advances in that area. At the same time, there are immense psychological challenges, as you know, in dealing with cancer treatment as well as cancer survivorship. And I've learned so much in this 5 years about the courage and strength and resilience and patience and need for social support that goes with cancer survivorship. So the fact that these wonderful people that you're going to hear from tonight are willing to share their stories, and the fact that I have faculty members and students and community members willing to work on training people to do this work effectively is so gratifying to me. I want to start out by letting you know that obviously DU is doing a lot to support this program. That's why we're in this beautiful venue, and our program gets to be opened by our very visionary Chancellor, Dr. Rebecca Chop. So I'd like you to welcome her, and she's going to have some opening remarks for us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to welcome you here tonight. Thank you for joining us. This is our second annual community event hosted by the Center for Oncology Psychology Excellence at the University of Denver, COPE. COPE is the first of its kind training program and partnership with community cancer centers. COPE offers graduate level specialty coursework to doctoral students in the Graduate School of Professional Psychology. It creates field placement opportunities in cancer centers across Colorado. It will build community partnerships to increase access to psychological and social services for cancer patients and serves as a hub for research and program evaluation. So COPE really fits into the vision of what we want DU to be. DU has long had a commitment to public service. And in our strategic plan, DU Impact 2025, our vision is to accelerate, expand, try to identify the needs of real people in the real communities around us, and use our capital, our intellectual capital, the training of our grad students, the wisdom of our faculty to partner with communities as they seek to address the real needs of people in their community. As Shelley said, every one of us in this room, I think, probably has a story, or in some of our cases, several stories to talk about surviving cancer. I want to tell you one of mine. My mother had cancer twice. My father died of cancer. I want to tell you a bit about my father's story because I think it's so relevant to what we're doing here. So my father was a typical Kansas farmer, didn't talk about his feelings, loved his family but couldn't express his feelings, talked about cars, you know the type, right? And when he got cancer, and it was a very painful experience for him, in his final months, what he kept saying to us was, I just need somebody to talk to. I don't know how to talk about this. And we all loved him, and we all surrounded him, and we all tried to talk to him. I'm an ordained minister. I've had counseling courses, but we didn't have the research. We didn't have the capacity, nor did he, nor did the ministers and the hospital people and the hospice people. So I like to think that what we're doing here will make sure in the future that families will be able to learn how to talk, that counselors, hospice people, and others will know how to serve, and that survivors and victims of cancer will also gain that capacity, because it's not born in us to talk about these things. And our culture, up until now, hasn't really supported talking about cancer. So thank you for your support. Thank you for all your work. Diane, thank you for founding this institute. Thank you for being here tonight.
And that's just the first of some really outstanding stories that you're going to get to hear tonight, inspiring and very thought-provoking. I want to tell you about what's going to happen this evening. I have a couple of people to introduce, and part of what happens in COPE, which you heard some about from the Chancellor, is really that integration of research and practice, and in particular, doing what universities can really do best, knowing how to generate, disseminate, and utilize the best knowledge available. So what we want to show you is both an academic and a lived experience perspective on oncology survivorship. And in order to do that, you're going to hear from our honorary chair tonight, Dr. Helen Coons, who's the president and clinical director of Health Psychology Solutions. Dr. Coons is well known in the psychology field as an excellent researcher and scholar in health psychology, but she's also a practitioner and has 25 years of experience in working with cancer patients and other kinds of health psychology patients. She's really well connected nationally. She's on the APA chair, now I always get this wrong, Council of Board of so Nicole's trying to tell me. Well, she's on the most important APA board. Let's just put it that way, okay? Take my word for it, because they have a lot of boards, but she's on the most important one. And she's been able to help connect us with the person that she'll introduce tonight, Dr. Julia Rowland, so I won't go into that introduction. But again, DU is really seeking to connect to the best national and international research and knowledge as we train practitioners, and you'll hear a little bit more about that tonight. Then she'll be able to turn the program over to Dr. Nicole Taylor. Dr. Taylor is an assistant professor at GSPP, and she is the director of COPE and is an outstanding teacher, scholar, and supervisor, mentor for the students. And I think the fact that we're both serving the public good and creating a workforce pipeline all at the same time is really an important part of COPE. So Nicole will be able to tell you a lot more about that. And then she'll introduce the panel. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Helen Coons to take the program from here.
Thank you, Dean Smith-Acuna, for your generous introduction. Where did you go? There you are. For your very generous introduction, and congratulations to DU and to all of you for this really innovative program. I'm honored to work with you this evening. I'm going to speak very briefly and provide a little overview, and then I have the honor of introducing Dr. Julia Rowland from NCI. I think most of you in the audience will agree that the last 4 to 5 decades, we've witnessed dramatic advances in both the biomedical and psychosocial care of children, teenagers, and adults across the lifespan with early and advanced cancers. This is true across almost all childhood and adult cancers. For example, we used to have extensive disfiguring surgeries that dramatically diminished functioning, but now we all so frequently have minimally invasive procedures with far fewer complications. Many cancer surgery is done laparoscopically. We use lasers, and increasingly, there are robotic approaches. Same with cancer radiation. Long ago, there was total body or wide beam radiation with risk of a lot of damage to non-tumor areas. Now we have focal radiation to spare healthy tissue. We use both external and internal beam radiation. We use proton therapy now, and increasingly gamma knife radiotherapy. How about chemotherapy? Long ago, we had uniform, highly complex, long regimens that resulted in a high level of toxicity for both children and adults. Over the years, we've moved to shorter protocols with better side effect prevention or management altogether. And in the last decade in particular, we've seen a dramatic shift to what we call personalized approaches with regard to chemotherapy. Now with oncotype testing, in other words, tumor genetics, some individuals no longer even get chemotherapy because we know that they may not benefit from it. Other individuals get hormonal treatment. We now have a wide use of targeted therapies and an increasing use of immune therapy and gene therapy, especially through tumor vaccines. Over the years, we, as a result of patients, families, healthcare providers, and the cancer advocacy community have helped us realize that there's a broad range of psychosocial concerns. Research is increasingly focused on psychosocial impact, cognitive changes, and the long-term impact on both patients and families. What's clear is that those of us with cancer and our families are overwhelmingly resilient in the face of health challenges. But what's also clear is this is an extremely difficult experience. Well, it's way beyond tonight to go through all the research on psychosocial issues. A few that have been addressed more recently, individuals who are at risk for anxiety and distress, cancer fears of recurrence and what it means to live and live well with uncertainty. What are the best strategies to communicate with family, friends, coworkers about cancer? We have much more open conversations now about the impact of cancer and its treatment on body image, on sexual health, and on relationships. We have much more dialogue about fertility and parenting challenges in the cancer community, and a much more open, albeit still difficult, conversations about end-of-life issues and decisions. As a result of psychosocial research, we have far more resources available and interventions to promote well-being for patients with both early and advanced disease. We now have recommendations and standards for psychosocial care, distress screening and treatment, and a strong plea for interprofessional teams to address psychosocial issues. All that said, tonight we really want to talk about bridging the research with the lived experience of patients and family members of all ages. What does it mean for us as a community to enhance the physical and psychosocial well-being? And what would it mean to educate the next generation of healthcare providers, including psychologists and other behavioral health providers, to really address the needs of the survivor community? On a very exciting note, as we move forward, we have Cancer Moonshot. Vice President Joseph Biden chaired this innovative process, and we hope that we will hear more recommendations around preventing cancer, around more personalized biomedical care, more personalized psychosocial care. And on that note, I'd like to introduce Dr. Julia Rowland. Dr. Rowland, are you with us?
I am.
Excellent. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Julia Rowland. She is a long-standing clinician, researcher, and teacher in the area of psychosocial aspects of cancer. She's worked with and conducted competitively funded research among both pediatric and adult cancer survivors and their families, published broadly in psychosocial oncology, including co-editing the groundbreaking text Handbook of Psychosocial Oncology, originally released in 1989, and certainly she is a frequent speaker addressing the psychosocial impact of cancer for lay and professional audiences. Dr. Rowland received her PhD in developmental psychology from Columbia and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in psychosocial oncology. While at Sloan Kettering, where she held joint appointments in pediatrics and neurology, Dr. Rowland helped to develop and was the first director of the Post-Treatment Resource Program, an innovative resource that continues to provide a whole range of non-medical services to patients and their families after the end of treatment. In 1990, Dr. Rowland moved to Washington, D.C. to become the founding director of the Psychosocial Oncology Program at Georgetown University in the Lombardi Cancer Center. Just 9 years after that, in 1999, she was recruited by the National Cancer Institute to become our first full-time director of the Office of Cancer Survivorship. Since joining the NCI, Dr. Rowland has helped promote the visibility of the Office of Cancer Survivorship and created numerous governmental and nonprofit partnerships to advance awareness about and funding for research addressing the health care and quality of life needs of our growing population of cancer survivors and their family. Dr. Rowland, we are deeply appreciative of your effective and enduring efforts to advance all aspects of cancer care for patients across the lifespan and their family members, and welcome you to the Denver University COPE Cancer Survivorship Roundtable. Dr. Rowland.
Thank you, Helen, for that just lovely introduction. And really, it's my pleasure to be here. Special thanks to you and to Dr. Taylor for the invitation to join you this evening at the COPE Roundtable. I have to say, when I first learned about COPE, I was both intrigued and very excited. Finally, we had a program that was going to really dedicate itself to training the next cadre of clinicians and hopefully researchers as well to address the psychosocial and behavioral needs of what is now our growing population of cancer survivors. I thought, by way of a little background, because I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the office that I have the privilege of serving, but the Office of Cancer Survivorship was actually started, as Dr. Kuhn said, in 1996 as a direct response to consumer advocacy. Patients, their loved ones, providers caring for them, going essentially to the then director of the Cancer Institute and saying it's a wonderful thing that so many individuals diagnosed today can expect to live years after their diagnosis. But we know very little to what we're returning individuals. We don't know what their unique needs are or what we have to be doing to intervene to ensure that the lives to which we are returning individuals are as full and productive and meaningful as they can be. So the director in 1996 turned around and created the Office of Cancer Survivorship specifically with the intention of helping promote science funded by the National Cancer Institute, looking at the long-term and late consequences of carrying a cancer history and interventions that might mitigate the negative and promote the optimal outcomes for that growing population. We celebrated our 20th anniversary last October, so in October of 2016. And as Dr. Kuhn said, it's been a very exciting ride to watch what's happened over time. From 3 million cancer survivors in 1971, when Nixon declared war on cancer and signed the Cancer Act, to 15.5 million individuals who carry that label today. And I'll pause a second here about labels. So the terms survivor, survivorship. Cancer survivor, the definition that we embrace at the National Cancer Institute, is the one that was put forward by the advocacy community back in 1986, when a group of 24 individuals got together in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and established what's now known as the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. That group at that time looked at the data and said, 1986, more than 50% of people diagnosed would be alive in 5 years, and they can't wait to pick up their lives for 5 years. Rather, we need to be having dialogues at the time of diagnosis to ensure that decisions are made with regard to treatment that are going to promote optimal outcomes for individuals. So they said, we have to get rid of the old language of survivor being someone who had remained 5 years disease-free and change that to be what we talk about as individuals from the moment of diagnosis and for the balance of their life. They never meant this to be a label. Rather, it was to be a message of hope. There is life after cancer, very important message. But even more importantly, that conversation has to occur from the moment of diagnosis. So that if you want to spare a limb, if you want to have children, if you need to have a certain capacity to enjoy your life, family, work, that's taken into consideration when you're making treatment decisions. So that is the history of the term survivor. Survivorship, as we define it in the Office of Cancer Survivorship, your office, as Dr. Kuhn said, is all the research that gets done and care delivered after definitive treatment. So it's a little bit different on the whole spectrum. While we consider individual survivors from day one to end of life, whether they die of cancer or something unrelated, survivorship science really focuses on the post-treatment. And that's why I'm very excited that that's thematically what you're talking about, but also what you're training up to, because so many of the individuals you'll see are going to live long-term after their cancer. And again, as Dr. Kuhn so elegantly pointed out, many survivors tell us it's not over when it's over. And sometimes the psychosocial impact, it has a lag and is not fully and deeply experienced until after treatment ends and the person stops and can take stock and said, what has just happened? How am I to move forward? And who's going to be there to help me do that? What is life going to be like? And how do I equip myself to move forward? We've had multiple national reports from the Institute of Medicine, now the National Academy of Medicine, the President's Cancer Panel, looking at the long-term and late effects of carrying a history of cancer. And time and again, while we're doing a reasonable job at beginning to address the medical sequelae from memory problems, fatigue, depression, nausea, vomiting, sexual dysfunction, bowel, bladder incontinence, where we consistently fail or don't do the optimal job is in the psychosocial domain. And in fact, it was such a big consequence of our finding of that this is the IOM report, National Institute of Medicine report, Cancer Care for the Whole Patient, Meeting Psychosocial Health Needs of this population, really that outlines, and I hope if all of you haven't read it, I'm going to encourage you to go up online, pull it down, read it in pieces. It's a very important document because it says not just that we need to do this, but how to do this. And to me, there are 4 important components that they outline in this. And I was privileged to be one of the program officers who oversaw this contract as they put this document together. And the 4 component pieces are that you have to have a conversation and talk to individuals and family members. How are they doing? What's going on? Using that as a conversation, that patient-doctor communication, family communication, is to identify problems where there are issues that have come up. That's the second part. The third is identifying and referring individuals to the help that they need, the care that needs to be delivered. And perhaps most importantly, and the piece we often neglect, is to follow back to see if this all worked. So it's not enough for us in the clinical setting when we see patients to say, this patient's depressed, I'm going to refer them for counseling, I'm going to check this box and my job is done. No, because we don't know if that person lost that referral slip or tried to get an appointment and was put on a wait list, couldn't see anybody, saw someone, didn't go well, they walked out of it, it was not helpful, or they felt additionally stigmatized by being told you need to go and see a mental health professional. So until we do that 4th piece of stepping in and saying, how are we going to see if we're making a difference, then we haven't completed the process. So you have an opportunity with the COPE program, and again, I'm so excited that this model exists, and I'm certainly hoping that it gets cloned up in a lot of other professional psychology programs across the country. So DU is a groundbreaker in this. They're out there at the cutting edge, so that we are going to have enough practitioners available who can deliver this care. Why is that an issue? Because, as I said, there's a growing population. With the baby boom population, we're going to see a veritable silver tsunami of individuals carrying a cancer diagnosis. So at the moment, we have 15.5 million. By 2040, we're going to have 26.1 million survivors in the country. Currently, 62% of those are 65 and older. By 2040, 73% are going to be 65 and older. So in your practice and your training, you need to be thinking about how do we take care of individuals across the lifespan. As again, Dr. Kuhn said, I started in pediatrics, and I've been working my way up the developmental continuum, just like a good developmental psychologist, womb to tomb psychology, as we used to refer to it, so that we can see what are the special needs across the lifespan of individuals who are diagnosed and living long-term with a history of cancer. We need to develop and test evidence-based interventions that can be readily disseminated. We need the people on the ground to be able to do this. And again, Dr. Coons mentioned in her remarks where we are right now. So everybody says, well, where's the money? Is there going to be funding for this? And I think certainly our hope is yes. The moonshot is a very exciting opportunity for all of us. And if you want to know more about the moonshot, I'd encourage you to go online to cancer.gov, the NCI's main site, type in Blue Ribbon Panel, and you can see the 10 bold recommendations that are in there. I would in particular encourage you to look at one of those 9, which is on symptom management. And certainly a large part of that is the psychosocial and behavioral challenges that individuals face who've been diagnosed and treated for cancer. And I will sort of end with a final note about definitions here. Included in the definition of survivor that was put forward in 1986 by the advocacy community was the notion that family members are also survivors. We've heard 2 very lovely, important examples of what it's like to be a family member of someone who has a cancer history. And we certainly need to consider them under the umbrella of our care. As Rosalind Carter, and Jimmy Carter's wife, a wonderful proponent of family resources and working with families and providing help to families, once said there are only 4 kinds of people in the world. People who have been caregivers, people who are caregivers, people who will be caregivers, or people who are going to need a caregiver. So including that when you think about the work that you do, the training you undertake, we need to have that full view of survivors and those who are close to them as we move the science and care forward. So again, it's my privilege to be able to provide you some remarks as you have this evening conversation, and I encourage all of you to go onto our website, see what we do at the Office of Cancer Survivorship, and know that it's really my privilege to serve in this role, and we hope that what we're doing is also coming to you. So thank you for your commitment, and a wonderful evening to you all.
Dr. Rowland, on behalf of the Planning Committee and on behalf of the audience, I want to express our appreciation for you joining us on a very snowy Washington evening and for your steady and effective and inspiring voice to bring survivorship issues across the lifespan front and center to all of us as patients, as families, as caregivers, as providers, and as caregivers. Thank you for your leadership, your energy, your insight. You are truly a visionary, and we are so grateful to have you joined us this evening and share your perceptions. Thank you.
Thank you all too. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to turn the program over to Dr. Nicole Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rowland, for being here. I think you're probably not connected anymore, but what an honor to have you speak and to Skype in and be with us today. Thanks, Dr. Coons, also for the introduction. And I am so thrilled to introduce our panel. We're going to make sure the technology is working here, so if anybody wants to grab a snack, please feel free to keep grabbing snacks and drinks and all of that while we're getting organized here. We are just so excited to have these 3 panelists here tonight. And I want to start by introducing them. We have Barry Peterson here in the middle. He's a CBS News senior correspondent as well as caregiver. And CBS News calls Peterson one of its most experienced correspondents. In a career of almost 4 decades, he has reported on everything from wars and national disasters to Paris fashions and the return of American jazz to Shanghai, China. Lots of fun stuff there. He has won 4 National Emmy Awards, including one for his coverage of the siege of Sarajevo, and shared both an Alfred I. DuPont Columbia University Award and a George Foster Peabody Award as part of CBS Radio's coverage of the 1989 democracy uprising at Tiananmen Square. Believe it or not, I remember that. His stories from inside Gaza during the 2014 war with Israel earned an Emmy nomination and an Edward R. Murrow Award. He was also honored for the 2010 Sunday Morning story about his wife Jan and her early onset Alzheimer's disease. The story was based on his best-selling book, Jan's Story, Love Lost to the Long Goodbye of Alzheimer's. Jan died in 2013, and Barry now lives in Denver and reports for the CBS Evening News, CBS This Morning, CBS Sunday Morning, and contributes to 60 Minutes Sports. He is married to Mary Nell Wolf. We're glad to have her here as well tonight. So that's Barry. Thank you for being here. We're also excited to introduce you to Daniel Halpern there in the middle. And he was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia in June of 2014 when he was 14 years old. He spent 9 months mostly in isolation at Children's Hospital, Colorado, through treatment and a bone marrow transplant, where he missed his entire freshman year of high school. After another many months at home, he returned to 10th grade at school with his friends and continues to return to the hospital once a week to broadcast a radio show to entertain patients and families, which helped keep his spirits up throughout his stay at the hospital. Can we all tune into that radio show? Oh, shoot. Maybe if we get close to the hospital, we can listen in. So thank you so much to Daniel for being here. I also want to thank his mom, Nadine, who's over here. And she has set up a bone marrow drive out in the lobby. And we are so thrilled that she's here to do that. It's such an important thing to do. If you're not yet a member of the bone marrow registry, we would really encourage you to sign up. It's a quick cheek swab. Painless, easy, very simple to do, and I'll give you a few more instructions at the end, but she'll be out in the lobby after we wrap up our program, so please consider doing that as well. So thanks to both Daniel and Nadine for being here tonight. And lastly, I want to introduce Amy Waninger, and Amy is a graduate of our International Disaster Psychology program. She graduated in 2014. After a brief stint as a brand strategist in corporate advertising, Waninger discovered her passion for trauma healing through the International Disaster Psychology program here at the University of Denver. She has worked with child trauma survivors at the Kemp Center in Colorado, torture survivors seeking asylum in the U.S., sexual assault survivors in the hospital setting, and she has co-authored trainings and intervention manuals for mental health counselors in Sri Lanka. She was previously head of training and curriculum development at the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, and currently dedicates her time to conducting trauma-informed trainings for local foster care organizations, as well as contributing to international research projects for the Center for Victims of Torture out of Minneapolis. Lots of important things. So we are so thrilled to have all of them here. Dr. Helen Coons and I will be helping to lead a question and answer session after you hear from each of them to start off. There's some cards in the middle of your table. So if you have any questions, we'll hope to have some time for at least a couple questions after they're done speaking. So feel free to jot those down as they're talking, and also take a chance to come up and talk with them after we're done if we don't get to everyone's questions. So thanks again to all of you for being here, and I will turn it over to the panelists.
All those years of television, I knew that. Can you hear me? Okay, let's get this out of the way right at the beginning. I'm really old, okay? All those places I lived, when I ran up debt, I just moved to the next country. So. Now, the reason I say that was because I went through college in the 1960s, working in newspapers into the 1970s. And I was saying to somebody earlier, did you know that in the 1960s and 1970s, people did not die of cancer? Did you know that? You know why? Because they were too embarrassed to have somebody in an obit report that they had died of cancer. It was an era when people thought it was like a communicable disease. All right, I'm sort of a pink frog. I'm a male caregiver, which is not all that usual. In fact, I'm a two-timer. I took care and helped my wife, Jan, when she developed early Alzheimer's in 2005. And we were still living in Tokyo and Beijing. And then I moved to Denver in 2009, and we brought her here in a facility, and Jan died in 2013. And I'm married to, now, the wonderful Mary Nell Wolf, who will not like me to say this, but she needs to stand up. So she and Mary Nell has a very important anniversary tomorrow for both of us. Not our wedding anniversary, the anniversary of her 1 year since she had a double mastectomy for breast cancer. A diagnosis that came, believe it or not, on December 24th. So I want to talk a little about caregiving. Challenges of caregiving. Some of you are professional, but some of you are family. Let me tell you how a family caregiver is chosen. Not by skill level, because they didn't go to nursing school or take classes. Not by experience, because God knows they haven't had any. Family caregivers are very often chosen by geography. What that means is they're the closest person to the person who is sick. That's how you become a family caregiver. And you'd be surprised, or maybe not, how many families where somebody takes over that responsibility, usually a woman, and other siblings tend not to want to be involved and maybe not even to help. Guilt. We're going to talk about guilt. This is a man thing, but give me a little slack here. I believed in my life that a man's job was to take care of his wife and his family and to protect them. But I couldn't do anything. When Jan got Alzheimer's, I couldn't protect her, and I couldn't do anything when Mary Nell got breast cancer to protect her. You know, I have said to people that if there had been somebody who walked up to me the day that Jan was diagnosed and said, look, we need so many people who have Alzheimer's today, her or you, I would have said me. She doesn't deserve to have Alzheimer's. If somebody had asked me the day that Mary Nell was diagnosed, how about if you take the cancer on and not her, I would have said, that's my job, to take the cancer. But I couldn't. And it's very hard for a man to realize how powerless he can be when people that he loves become ill. Fear. So we were in Sedona during Mary Nell's chemotherapy. And we obviously had talked a lot about this, and we've had many discussions and conversations, and I have no idea what we were talking about that night. And I suddenly realized I was crying. And I don't mean crying. I mean weeping. I mean out of control crying where my body was actually shaking. And it was finally the ability, I guess, to express the fear that I had. I had lost one woman I loved. Was I going to lose another one? And it's terrifying. I know that those of you who are caregivers who have gone through this understand how terrifying and helpless that can make you feel. Distance. So this is a caregiver thing. I hope you'll understand this, but let me walk you through it. The person who has the disease is on a journey, okay? The caregiver is part of that journey, but is not on the journey. Now, I remember when Mary Nell's oncologist was talking about the chemotherapy, she would say, well, what are the side effects going to be? And I said, well, I don't know, because everybody is different. So every journey is different. And I know, bless your hearts, people say, I know how you feel, but you don't really know how you feel, because that journey is different. I'll give you an example of the gulf between the person who is involved in the experience and the person who is caregiving. So you mentioned a couple of years ago I was in Gaza during the Israeli-Gaza war. It was a particularly bad place to be. They were shelling all day and all night, lots of sniper fire. I was just thinking when I was thinking about this, the hotel room, we had windows like this, that if there was something close by, we'd all run into the hall because we didn't want to get hit by the glass if the windows blew out. We went into stories about people who had suffered extraordinary loss. A man who buried his 3-year-old daughter, or driver whose son, Jamal, was I think about 9 years old, who went out to play and a missile went awry and went down, and 10 minutes later, his mother kissed him goodbye, and 10 minutes later, he was gone. These are hard stories to cover. But I knew what was going on, in the sense that I knew it was stupidly dangerous. I knew that. You have to tell me that. But I understood what we were doing, the precautions we were taking. We had a security guy with us, the places that we went, the person who knew Gaza really well who said, we can go down that street, but you can't go down that street. So I, as the person on that particular journey, had a sense that I was going to be okay. I think that's maybe a journalist thing. We all think it's not going to happen to you, right? So on the other side of that gulf is Mary Nell, sitting in Denver, Colorado. And all she gets are my chirpy little phone calls. And then she turns on the TV and she sees her husband, getting sniped at one point and, being involved where explosions are taking place. But more than that, telling these excruciatingly painful stories. This is the gulf between the person who's having that experience with cancer or Alzheimer's and the person who is the caregiver. We're on separate and different journeys. Stress. I said stress, she said depression, or I said depression and she said stress. I can't remember. So we put them together. We did a presentation talking about the book to a group of caregivers, family caregivers, a lot of them, and then professional caregivers. And afterward, we were out in the hall. This is in St. Paul, Minnesota. There were like a zillion people. And a woman came over to talk to us, and she was already crying by the time she got to us, a young woman. And she started to tell us about her taking care of her mother. She was so involved in this that she had lost her job. Her fiancé had left her. She'd lost her apartment. And she was now moving 80 miles away to be with her mother. And I thought about how people cope with that. She had 8 siblings who were contributing nothing. She was doing all of this on her own. And I thought how dangerous and difficult, how much stress and depression goes along with that, which leads me to survival. And those of you who are caregivers will understand that. Those of you who work with caregivers, I hope, will understand this. It became apparent to me when I was living in Tokyo and then Beijing. Jan had been diagnosed that we'd reached the point where I couldn't leave her alone anymore. She would go put a pot on the stove with nothing in it and turn it up full on the heat and then come in and take a nap. And I thought, okay, we're not going to be able to deal with this. So we hired a woman, a wonderful nurse, retired nurse from Tacoma, who came to live with us in Tokyo and Beijing, back and forth, and the whole thing. We did this for about 8 months. And one day, Diane Malone, it was a beautiful fall afternoon in Tokyo. The sun coming in, we had this beautiful apartment. On the 32nd floor, you could see the city and the sun's coming in. It was this very wonderful soft light. And she sat me down. And she said, I think it's time that we talk about placing Jan. And I said, I know she's gotten worse since you've been here, but she hasn't gotten that much worse. Well, here's what happens when you have a person who is a nurse helping you as a caregiver. She takes your blood pressure, she watches what you're doing, and she sees that the alcohol is getting more and more on a regular basis. And she said, this is not about Jan. This is about you. You, she said, are going down, watching me under the process of caregiving. So she said something that I think would be helpful to be chiseled in stone, wherever you chisel things in stone, for caregivers. And this is how she said to me, explained to me, we're going to have to make this move. Who will take care of the person you love if you are not here? And what she's saying is, if you can't survive this, then Jan will be alone. I have such respect for people who are caregivers, professional caregivers, and family caregivers. God knows we've met a zillion of them. And they're on a different journey than the person with the disease. I think it's also this extraordinary gift to the people that you love to be a caregiver, if you're a family caregiver. My favorite line was when Jan was at the facility, and we talked about Jan, and they came to a speech that we gave, and they left, and one of the people said, God, I forgot. he doesn't get to go home at night, right? So you don't, because you're a family caregiver. It's 24 hours. So my advocacy for those of you who are either caregivers or work with caregivers is to make sure that you don't get taken down. So you have to remember, one of the jobs of being a caregiver is to take care of the caregiver. Thank you. Your own.
Is my mic on? Yeah. First off, I would just like to say thank you to all of you for having me here and having us here to speak to you all today. My name is Daniel Halpern. Some of you in this room may know me as the kid who got to announce the Broncos' first-round draft pick at the NFL draft last year. But before that, I was just a whiny cancer patient on the 7th floor of Children's Hospital. Back in June of 2014, I was diagnosed with a rare form of AML leukemia known as APML. The moment I found out I had cancer, I said to myself, okay, let's get started and get past this so I can get on with my life. I was never scared at first, and I thought it would only take a couple of weeks, and I would be back and ready to go to school by August. That was a little presumptuous of me. For the next 9 months of my life, I would be on the 7th floor of Children's Hospital with only a short break here or there. The first few weeks in the hospital are all a blur to me, and I barely remember any of it, aside from stories that my parents and doctors have told me. While in the hospital undergoing treatment, doctors and nurses constantly worried about me and did everything they could to keep my pain under control. Fast forward a month and a half to the end of my induction round of inpatient stay in the hospital, and I was informed that I had not reached remission, and as a result, I would be in the hospital for 3 more rounds of chemo, followed by a bone marrow transplant. Over my next 3-month-plus long vacations to the hospital, I was the kid whose biggest side effect from cancer was boredom. I would sit and watch ESPN for hours a day, build 1,000-piece Lego sets in a matter of hours. I would get up and out and walk around the floor several times a day, all in order to stay a little bit active in relation to my circumstances. I watched so much, in fact, that I finished walking a marathon between stays in the hospital. All this activity was nothing compared to any normal, healthy person, but for me, a kid that had to relearn how to walk after his first stint in the hospital, it was nothing short of a miracle. I still believe to this day that one of the reasons I was so relatively healthy compared to other patients on the floor was because of me being active. During those next 3 bouts in the hospital, I had a few hurdles to jump over. I had the occasional mouth sore or allergic reaction to this or that, but for the most part, I felt good enough to leave that I could have left at any time. Sadly, there's this dumb thing called an ANC that is kind of a buzzkill and makes you stay longer than you want to. Luckily for me, the nurses on the 7th floor constantly kept me busy, whether it be talking about football and asking me to help them with their fantasy teams, watching the FIFA World Cup, and even playing Xbox with me late at night. There was never a moment of boredom that the nurses couldn't help fix. While all the chemo treatments and drugs I received were extremely important during my medical treatments, the psychological therapy was overwhelmingly essential as well. Though cancer is a very physical battle, the mental side of the fight is just as difficult, if not even more so. All cancer patients must think they can beat it. You need a positive outlook on anything to accomplish it. That's a very important part of the psychological battle. I always had a positive outlook on beating cancer, but I would be lying if I said there weren't days where I thought I was losing. This is where my psychologist, Dr. Bob Casey, came in handy. Though my amazing doctors helped me beat cancer physically, Bob helped me beat it mentally. If there's one thing that is a must-do in order to help patients, is to get to know them and to let them know you. One of the reasons working with Dr. Casey was so successful for me was because we were able to find common interests. A big part of the psychological game is being able to distract yourself. Bob figured out very early how big of a football fan I was, and used that as a platform to get to know me better and to gain my trust for when we had to have important cancer discussions. Bob is a devout Patriots fan, while I am a diehard Broncos and Packers fan. So you can imagine there was some pretty funny banter over the football season. The highlights of some of what Bob did for me on a daily basis, let me take you through a typical meeting with him. Bob would enter the room, I would tell him the Patriots sucked. He would mention how they were still in first place, and I would make a joke about whatever scandal they were going through, whether it be Aaron Hernandez at the beginning or Deflategate at the end. Bob could always get me out of a bad mood through talking football with me. I've said many times before that football helped me through bad times in the hospital, but really, Dr. Casey took the distraction of football and stretched it past just Sundays and made it last all week. Yes, he helped me stay distracted and busy through my boring stays at the hospital, but he helped me make big decisions as well. Bob convinced me to keep eating through mouth sores so I wouldn't need an NG tube. He convinced me that getting a Broviac was the best thing to do. He convinced me that even when everything looked dark and hopeless, there's always a better way to look at it. The only thing that he could never convince me of was that Tom Brady didn't deflate all those footballs. Bob's constant optimism shed off on me and gave me the positive outlook required to mentally beat cancer. After all my rounds of chemo, it was time for my bone marrow transplant. I was readmitted to the hospital on November 2nd to undergo my final round of chemo. I had a horrible rash one day. The next day I had problems breathing. The next day I was throwing up for 12 hours straight. The point is, it wasn't fun. But through this excruciatingly painful and difficult time, I had the best doctors and nurses right by my side to help me through it. The day I had my transplant was November 12th, 2014, now known as my second birthday. The rest of my journey is smooth sailing for the most part. It took a month and a week to finally get out of the hospital, followed by another short stay or two due to a nagging infection. I still say to this day that the worst part of all of this is my awful shin splints that I have as a result of weaker bones from chemo. Not that bad if you ask me. For all of you that are wondering what are some of the things Bob did that worked, I will give you a short list for all the psychologists and caregivers here. Always talk to the patient as if they were adults and very intelligent. Chances are they have been in the hospital for a while, and they will know, if they have been in the hospital for a while, they will know what their diagnosis is. They will know what all the different medicines are. They will know what they need to do to stay healthy in general. The worst thing you can do is to talk down to them as if they are not intelligent. Dr. Casey always was very efficient at talking to me in almost a way that made me seem more informed than he was. In doing so, he gave me the ability gave me a higher ability to feel in control and less helpless overall. Number 2, talk less about the treatment itself. It may sometimes be better to go an entire visit without saying anything other than just, how are you feeling today and how are you feeling about everything at the end of a conversation. The name of the game is distraction when you are pent up in a 12 by 12 room for weeks and months at a time. The less I had needed to focus on cancer, the better. In the long run, it also helped me be more attentive and willing to answer important cancer questions if they came up. You are flooded with the same questions 10 times a day. You will be less enthusiastic or willing to answer all 10 out of 10 times. If you all sit down with a patient and ask 15 questions, you should only ask 3 to 7 of those concerning cancer. Good questions to ask are stuff like, how are you doing with keeping up with all your schoolwork if it's a pediatric case like myself? Or how are you liking your doctors? Stuff like that can also help you gauge their happiness overall and well-being in the hospital. Also, as I mentioned before, getting to know them is key because you can ask so many questions just based off of their interests. For example, Bob figured out early on that I was a football fan, so he used that topic in a lot of his questions. A key thing that I picked up on that some of my doctors did was going and looking up information about football just so they could have intelligent conversations with myself. Getting invested in your patient's interests is very key. Number 3, one of Bob's best strategy was using analogies when it came to the big talks about needing to choose between 2 alternatives. Dr. Casey was always able to make a clear idea in my mind using analogies. For me, football analogies were key. You're not getting the vibe here. I'm a big football guy. He would compare the threat of mouth sores through a football situation. You can choose to do extra mouth care, but have a possibility of getting mouth sores in the end, or you can do no mouth cares and almost definitely get mouth sores. It's like passing the ball on 4th and 20 versus running it. If you pass on 4th and 20, there's no guarantee that you will get the first down, but at least there's a possibility. If you take mouth care, it's possible not to get mouth sores, but there's still a possibility of getting them. If you run on 4th and 20, though, you won't get the first down no matter what. If you don't do the mouth care, you will get mouth sores no matter what. Putting it in terms that they will understand will be extremely beneficial and making them know what they are choosing between. 4th, and finally, joke. I can't stress it enough, but you need to keep the patient happy. and laughing. Bob was clever at always being witty and joking with me, even when it meant joking at his own expense. That helped so much. For the most part, if you can do those 4 things that Bob did, it will help your relationship with the patient and help their overall well-being. Thank you very much for letting me share my story with you, and I hope I helped you all be better psychologists and caregivers in the future for whiny cancer patients like myself.
There we go. That's not intimidating to follow at all. By the way, we have the same diagnosis month and year. All right, so I graduated from GSPP, like Nicole was saying, Dr. Taylor was saying, with my master's in international disaster psychology. Through that program, I focused my work in trauma psychology. About three weeks after I graduated from the program, with dreams of going and working for UNICEF over somewhere in Jordan or something very exciting, I was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, which I didn't know a lot about at the time. I just thought it was kind of like a skin cancer thing, but it had metastasized for me. It was in my liver and in all of my bones, including my spine, which made me particularly freaked out, so I always mention that specific bone. But I was shocked. I was shocked because before that, or at that time, I had been a daily runner. Dr. Barrett can attest, I would show up in class with these disgusting-looking organic green smoothies that I made at home every day, and it blew my mind that this was happening to me. My first oncology appointment, I was told I'd be lucky if I was here in 4 months. So I had to get my head wrapped around that, pull my application from UNICEF, and the next, the next 6 months are a blur of horrific treatments that required a week-long stay in the ICU each round, a couple of bone replacement therapies or surgeries that have left me with a significant amount of titanium in my body, and consequently the nickname Wolverine. But that, for me, was survival mode. Those 6-7 months, I was going 100 miles a minute. I was the most obedient I've ever been in my life, listening to the doctors, eating when I could, whatever. And it wasn't until, I should mention that that treatment has about a 5% success rate. So standing here today, I'm very happy to share with you that I was in that 5%. Thank you. So I felt very lucky. It was weird. I went from feeling like the unluckiest girl in the world to one of the luckiest. And it wasn't until I stopped treatment, post-active treatment, this phase that we call survivorship, and I didn't know any of these terminologies at the time, but that I finally had the chance to take a step back, take a breath, see how I was doing. And the truth was that I wasn't doing so great. I didn't know where to go from there. I didn't know who to talk to. One of the things about underfunded and underrepresented cancers are that you don't get things like a nurse navigator. And you don't have your own group. There's no melanoma group. And I didn't know how to get the help that I knew from my training from GSPP through the IDP program. I knew that I needed additional help. And I didn't know where to find that. And I looked really hard, and it was encountering the survivorship issues post-treatment that I realized it's a lot different than I imagined. There's no going back to who I was before, which was a huge bummer because I was super excited to go back to exactly who I was before diagnosis. And I needed someone, something, some people, something to help me. And I searched and searched, and it was a long process, but I was able to kind of stitch together a patchwork of support through pretty awesome organizations that thread outdoor adventures with cancer healing, surprisingly therapeutic. Those people, the people that I've met through those experiences, continue to play a significant role in my life. I will share a story with you that happened last week because I thought this would be an interesting story to share in this particular night. But I was talking to a girlfriend of mine who I met at a camp, and she's a stage 4 ovarian cancer survivor, and she is mentoring a newly diagnosed girl, similar in age. And she called me last week, and she said, this girl, she's like, I don't know what to do about this debilitating fear of recurrence. And my friend responded to her, therapy. She's like, that's the one thing I can't figure out. That's the one thing I still need to go to therapy for. And finding different levels of outlets and resources was really important for me. It helped me get through some stuff that I wasn't expecting to try to get through and I couldn't have done by myself. I also, through a lot of trial and error, found a really amazing therapist who had never worked with an oncology patient before and really worked hard with me to figure out what it is I needed, listen to what was happening. For me, it was important to talk all about my treatment because that was something that I didn't want to put on my friends and family. I feel like they're going through a lot. Walking with you through that journey is a lot to carry, and I didn't want to put even more on their shoulders. So this was a safe place where I could whine. We never talked about football, but we did talk about everything else. And what struck me really amazingly were the parallels that I was seeing between clients that I had worked with who were trauma survivors and what I was going through, which I wasn't expecting. You're working with a torture survivor. Torture is a very clear and obvious trauma. You are fighting your way through cancer. It doesn't feel like a trauma. It doesn't feel like the trauma that I'd been working with. But my reactions were the reactions of my clients. My body, what I was going through, the debilitating fear of recurrence. I was telling this story earlier this evening, but it wasn't until I was in Target in the organization section, going down the aisle by those giant plastic tubs. The smell of that plastic is strikingly similar to the taste of saline before I got treatment. And my body shut down, and I had to sit down in the middle of the aisle in Target. And that is when I realized my mind might be denying that I'm going through trauma reactions, but my body's telling me, and I can't deny that. So it's been interesting to see what I do therapeutically, because it's also really similar to what I work through with clients. Grief work, not about necessarily losing people, although once you're in the community, that's something you need to watch out for as well. But grieving the loss of my dreams. You know, it's unlikely that I will go and work over in Jordan anymore. I've got to be close to definitive medical care. I've got scans and brain MRIs every 3 months. Grieving that loss, acknowledging that that's an important grief process. The trauma triggers, absolutely. Acceptance of where I am, where I'm going. And just kind of this idea that when you're working with a trauma survivor, safety is always important, working towards making sure they feel safe and ensuring that there's an environment where they continue to feel safe. That was tricky with torture survivors because they don't necessarily, the ones I was working with didn't necessarily have citizenship here yet. And building this sense of security can be tough because it's not always accurate. Same with particularly, the idea of reoccurrence of cancer. How do you make that person feel safe when it could come back at any time? So the parallels that I experienced between the trauma training that I went through at TSVP and my own experiences in recovery and continue to do through survivorship of cancer was mind-boggling, and it was why I was so excited to hear about COPE and to know that we will now have more trained individuals ready to help the growing number of people that will be going through this. So thank you for listening to my story and having us all here.
Thank you so much to all three of you for telling your stories, and what powerful stories and experiences. Thank you for sharing that vulnerability with all of us here tonight. If any of you do have questions, feel free to jot those down, and we'll start with a couple of the questions that we have prepared here. But if you do have any, maybe some of the volunteers could help grab some questions from everyone. But I really appreciate how you all highlighted some of the psychological issues that you faced as survivors, as patients going through the process, and as a caregiver. And I'm wondering if you can highlight any other issues that didn't come up. Amy, you talked about trauma, fear of recurrence, certainly some of the caregiving issues that came up that Barry talked about. Daniel, the boredom was really especially prominent for you, and just a lot of fear during the process, I think, kind of came through from what all of you were saying. But I wonder if there's any issues that didn't come up that you think are important for people to realize for cancer survivors.
Just leave this on from now on. Well, one thing that I was very surprised to experience that I'd also worked with clients extensively was survivor's guilt. I was given a death sentence and made it through, was in this tiny percentage, had nothing to do with me. It all had to do with chemistry and in whatever it is that you necessarily believe in. But I should have been excited and happy and felt lucky, and I did. But I felt such overwhelming guilt by the people that I made friends with in this community who went through the same treatment, had the same diagnosis, and are no longer here today, or that are fighting a battle to this day. I was surprised that I would have felt something like survivor's guilt, and that was I'm still working on working through that one.
If you have anything to add.
I'm not that smart, trust me. I've been to a lot of places that Amy has studied, and probably met a lot of people in that first moment of trauma. And I think it's easy to forget sometimes that trauma, there are obviously stages, I'm sure you could explain them to me. Trauma doesn't go away. Let me make a real confession. I had to be treated for post-traumatic stress disorder because I covered a story of the Asian tsunami, and it became overwhelming because of the number of people who had died. This is in Phuket. And most of them were Danish children, because it was a big Christmas holiday place. So do you remember after 9/11, people put pictures up of their family members that they hoped maybe had been taken to a hospital? So as the story went on, we kept seeing these pictures of beautiful little blonde kids. Have you seen them? Did he get to a hospital? Did he do something? So the treatment that I had, I thought, was intriguing in the sense that I didn't realize, because I'm not that smart, that trauma doesn't go away unless you deal with it. And the guy who treated me said, we're going to start with 10 traumatic incidences, and I expected him to start with the one that had triggered this reaction. He said, nope, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and work from there. And here I am, an all grown-up man, old, as I promised, not really realizing how much of that you carry along. And I sometimes wonder, because I never get to meet people after they're in that situation, or I've interviewed them because their family was wiped out. I don't get to come back to do that again. But I sometimes wonder, when you're dealing with things like this, how hard it is even for ourselves to realize how deep and how long-lasting this can be.
I would have to say a thing that it was touched on a little bit, but it's kind of after, like life after cancer. It's very hard to kind of assimilate back into regular life. You have, after bone marrow transplant, you need to wear a really thick blue mask on you. And it was kind of scary for me to go out and go to a store and go here and there. You need to keep the mask on, but every step you take, I mean, there could be some germ that you touch here, and you can breathe in the wrong air, and you can get sick, and it could be the end of it pretty much. So you need to live life very cautiously, and it's hard to do, and sometimes you have trust issues, which are hard to deal with, but talking through it can always help. And I mean, when there's friends and family there to help, it's always good.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
In that state that you just described, how did you adjust to the fact that before cancer, the whole world was just a benign and cool place to be in? And at that state that you mentioned, everything around you is dangerous.
I mean, still to this day, I don't think I've really adjusted fully back to kind of how it was before, where I mean, I could go lick dirt and not think twice about it. But I mean, I still am very cautious. I wash my hands a lot. I mean, I don't drink out of water fountains. I don't do a lot of, I mean, things that just regular everyday people wouldn't think twice about. So in a sense, it hasn't gone away. But at the same time, I've moved past a lot of it. If my friends are sick, I might want to sit a seat or two away from them, keep them away, but I'm past that stage, and my doctors always tell me, and at this point, they're trying to kick me back to just a regular pediatrician rather than keep going and wasting their time on the oncology unit. But they say, you have a regular immune system now. You can fight illnesses and diseases, and I mean, it doesn't really get through my mind that if I'm sick, it's terrifying for me pretty much. The first time I got sick after I was back at school and out of the mask and really past everything, my immune system and I was back to where not a regular person's was. It probably will never be there, but at least to a certain extent where I can fight disease. And I got a cold, and I thought it was going to be like the end of the world. I was freaking out. I was so upset, and I didn't know what to do. But you need to realize that if your doctors say you're okay, you're probably going to be okay. I trust them above everything else. So it's hard to move past that everything can kill you state. But it's the further out you get, the more you can adapt to it.
Thank all of you for sharing those insights and psychosocial concerns, I think all of which get lost in our dialogue. We have a question from the audience. What was more important to you to hear from your providers? A message of hope, or all on the level, a realistic one? How did your best providers use hope to heal?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, there are not a lot of melanoma oncologists in Colorado, so I didn't really have a lot of choice in who my provider was. That said, I love him dearly now, but I also refer to him as like my very favorite curmudgeonly professor. Hope was never really part of any of our discussions. And you're actually reminding me of a conversation I had with him last winter where, so chemo doesn't work for melanoma. So the treatment I was talking about is an old immunotherapy. We're used to the newer ones now, but it was an old one. And essentially, you know, when you think too much, I just kept thinking about the only thing that's keeping this cancer at bay is this jacked up immune system. And I got sick 5 times last winter. So when I went to see him, I asked him this question, like, oh, if my immune system is what's protecting me, and I'm getting sick more than anyone else around me, what does that mean? And I think his answer was what he thought was hope, but it was actually, so what he said was, oh, you know, that's probably just the immune system working really hard against the cancer and not caring about a cold. And I think he thought that was hopeful. And it scared me so much. So I didn't experience a lot of hope from my medical providers, but I absolutely appreciated when they shot it straight to me. When he told me that I'd be lucky if I were here in 4 months, and I asked him, I read all these scary stats online, are these my prognosis stats? And he said, yep. That was helpful for me because I knew what I was dealing with. But I'm also kind of like a knowledge is power person, so it probably is dependent on the person. I've got a good friend who's got a similar diagnosis as me, and she can't even tell you what medicine she's been on, what cancer treatment she's been on, because that's not what she wants to think about. So I think it's probably dependent on the person and what works for them.
How about if I don't answer your question like any good politician?
That works.
No, I want to actually, but that's because I want to say something, Daniel. But not about that question. Before everybody disperses, I want to just talk a little bit about what you can do to help a person who is going through this or help the person who is caregiving. 3 things. When Mary Nell was going through this, I went to every appointment and took notes. And if you can do that, you have no idea how helpful that is, because after the 14th or the 16th appointment, it becomes such a blur. And we had a quick reference where I'd say that's not what he said, and she would say it is what he said, and of course she would be right. And I had taken the notes to prove it. Something that somebody did once that I thought was extraordinary. I had a friend who got breast cancer in New York who worked at CBS, and her sister came to be with her to help. But what her sister did I thought was fabulous. Her sister said, "You deal with the cancer, I will deal with the insurance company." She did all the forms and all the calls and all the "why aren't you paying this" and all that stuff. And I thought that was an extraordinary and unbelievably practical gift for someone who's going through that. And thirdly, if you know somebody who's caregiving, who's helping take care of someone, don't call and say, "What can I do?" Because what are they going to say? Nothing. Do something. You know, come over, call and say, "I'm going to come over tomorrow between 2 and 5. I'll take over, you go to the beauty salon." Even men do that, did you know that? You go shopping, you go to a movie, you go to something, because people who are caregivers will often resist the idea that they're not doing a good enough job. So if I give you this as a word of warning or a word of advice, if you can help somebody who's caregiving, don't ask, just tell them what you're going to do. See, I told you I wouldn't answer the question. Back to you, psychological things.
So I guess back to the beginning question, I'll answer quickly so we can get some more. I liked when the doctors kind of gave it to me straight. They told it how it was. And they did say a lot of hopeful things, and I kind of could weed through here and there. But for the most part, I didn't have a bleak prognosis or anything. I was pretty survivable, I guess. That's not really, I don't know if that's a word or whatever, but sure. I had a good chance at surviving through pretty much all of my treatment. So there wasn't too much hope. It was more just saying it how it was. So yeah, I like that.
So I have a question. You're a guy, so the doctor said football. You're a girl. How did the doctor treat you?
We basically just talked about ballerinas all day.
Okay.
Great answer, Amy. Thank you. This is a specific question about what the medical team talked to you about, actually. This is a great one from the audience. Daniel, you talked about this a little bit, especially your work with Dr. Bob Casey, who we were thrilled to have come to speak in our first COPE class in the fall with Daniel, and they are a great team to present together. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. So I appreciate you sharing how helpful that was for you. This question is, did any of the medical team, especially for Amy and Barry, that worked with you during treatment talk to you about the importance of mental health and help provide resources or referrals?
You go.
Okay, that's an easy one.
You go,
Nope.
girl.
No, that was never. I've actually been talking to my fiance about this, trying to figure out what to say to you guys, what's important, what's not important. I'm so in it. And he made the comment that with my team of world-renowned oncologists and surgeons, if what was happening to me didn't beep or show up on a scan, they're not interested. They're in survival mode. So when I was needing support in another way, in an emotional or psychological way, they didn't know even where to refer me.
I don't remember anybody asking me how I felt. Part of it is because you're focused on the person. I mean, I have a different perspective because I'm with the person who has the actual disease. I didn't care how I felt. I was worried about, what Marinelle was being told. But I don't remember anybody asking Marinelle how she felt. That, they were like, here's the results and here's the test and things like that. And I think that's a fabulously bad way to deal with people who are going through the trauma.
We agree. That's why we're here. We are hoping to spread the word, and we hope all of you who are here tonight will continue to spread the word about the importance of this psychological and emotional support for cancer patients, and continue to talk to medical providers, talk to your friends, let them know that this is such an essential part of treatment. And unfortunately, we need to start wrapping up. I feel like we could stay here all night and keep asking questions.
I'm
but
kidding. How about you, Dan?
I wanted
You stay all
to.
night?
I'm not up to anything.
I wanted
Nobody
to
leave.
just send it back to you if there's anything you wanted to close with, anything you were hoping to share with the audience before we start the wrapping up process. If you would like to have any closing comments.
I will quickly say that I've said this to Dr. Taylor's class as well. I am an open book because I do believe I am in the school of thought that knowledge is power, and I want to give as much power to as many people as possible. So if you've got questions, anything specific or broad, I do want to be an open book for this dialogue. I think that what is happening through COPE is invaluable and high demand, low supply. So let's get out there and train people. And if you've got any questions, anything I can help with or share my experience, I'm happy to.
I love what I do. I get to go meet all kinds of people. Some of them bad, some of them good, some of them extraordinary. But being here with you two is just a humbling experience. So God bless you both for what you've been through.
Last thing I guess that I want to say is just thank you all for having me and having us. And also, if you can all that qualify sign up for the bone marrow registry. A bone marrow donor saved my life. I was just an anonymous donor that signed up because he wanted to, and it saved my life. And hopefully, all of you that sign up can save someone else's life also.
Daniel, you mentioned people who qualify. I'm thinking it's under the age of 60. Is that correct still?
Is it 18 to 55?
So if you fit into that, please visit with Nadine out in the lobby.
I officially don't like you.
Thank you. I'll also hand this over to Dr. Coons for any closing remarks.
To thank all of our panelists for your insights, for your candor, your honesty, for your courage. As we talked earlier, while we see so many patients of all ages and caregivers and family members be profoundly resilient, it's still really hard. And that's the piece that gets lost, even with people who are coping very effectively. And you're all have really been a gift tonight to share with the audience your story and your journey, and we're all deeply grateful and respectful.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing these stories. If you three want to stay here for 1 second, we're going to transition to the podium over here, so we'll keep you up here for just a little bit longer.
Are we paid to stay longer?
That's why they get the big money, right? So I am so pleased to introduce Ms. Diane Simard, and I just feel so grateful that Diane came into my life about 1.5 years ago now, and she is our COPE founder, who is really the person who is behind this, who helped us get this started, and we are so grateful that she is here and has helped generously support the start of this program. So I'm going to turn this over to Diane to share her story, and then we'll have some closing remarks after that.
Wow, what an evening. And it warms my heart so much to see all of you who've been impacted in some way by this dreadful, awful disease come out tonight to support each other and to support what I saw was a horrible, unbelievable deficiency in our healthcare system and continues to be. As Nicole mentioned, I'm Diane Simard. Stage 3 breast cancer survivor. I'll have my 2-year anniversary on Saturday. Woo! Thank you. So it's not a coincidence that we're meeting tonight. A year ago, we launched COPE at a similar type of event, and I just, when I was going through my breast cancer journey, it was my year of breast cancer in 2015, I received the diagnosis on February 11th, and I could not have been more shocked. Heart disease and dementia run rampant in my family. No one ever had cancer, and I know this is prevalent, and it happens very often, but I just hadn't prepared myself. I didn't know anything about cancer. I was embarrassed, ashamed, shocked, in denial. I didn't know where to start. I'm a little bit of a type A overachiever, would you say? Some of my colleagues are here. And I couldn't believe now I have to deal with cancer. I've just been through 7 years of hell in business. The recession was really particularly tough on me, and now I have to deal with cancer. So anyway, I sped read as many cancer books as I could. I stopped eating sugar, tried to eat right, because all of a sudden that was going to just miraculously solve this cancer problem. So I just overdid everything for a while, and when I finally got started on my 10-month treatment program, which started out with 16 rounds of chemo and then 2 surgeries and finished up with 33 radiation treatments, as I was wrapping up with chemo and about my next to the last Taxol treatment, and for those of you in the audience who've been through breast cancer, Taxol is when the neuropathy sits in and the body aches, and I just got so sick and tired of chemo, and I just felt like I couldn't go on. I was those darn weekly steroids. I was putting the pounds back on and more that I had lost during the first Red Devil part. And I was just so frustrated. And so the nurse navigator was calling me, and quite regularly, because they were concerned, because I tend to do things my own way. And she said, Diane, we're just want you to know that you're welcome to attend a breast cancer support group. It might be very helpful. And I said, well, I'm not a group person. Nobody gets me. That's probably the last thing that I would want to do. And she said, well, make sure then that you take advantage of Free Massage Monday. And I was just so furious. And so I asked my oncologist, I said, can you refer me to someone? I know you've all talked about this, but I had the same response. Someone who understands me as an individual, that doesn't put me in with a group of other people. And my oncologist gave a great answer. And she said, Diane, not very few of these specialists exist. And I said, well, why is that? And she said, well, because when it comes to cancer, whether it's philanthropical dollars or government dollars, most of the dollars go to research to find cures for all the different types of cancer, which I very much respect. And oh, by the way, nothing that we're doing here at COPE is intended to compete with the research dollars. That is still so critically important. But then I asked my oncologist, I said, but wait a minute, the dollars that have gone to help find cures, the treatments are getting so much more effective, we're living longer, but what kind of lives are we living? And she said, I know, if you can figure this out, please let me know. And if you find someone who can help, because I've got tons of patients that need this kind of individualized psychosocial support. So I just started snooping around, kicking over some rocks, talking to some folks. I knew my dear friend Ashley Halico, who I'd worked with here at DU. I said, I don't know, this is a really odd, it sounds like a training problem to me. Can we figure this out? And she recommended that I meet with Dr. Shelley Smith-Acuna, who then led me to Dr. Nicole Taylor. And as they say, the rest from there is history. We got our heads together and first started talking about the importance of an even larger health psychology issue, which totally agree. And I said, well, that's a big problem to solve, but how about if we start with cancer? And so we agreed to do that, and I founded the specialty, which is a 12-credit specialty. And I tell you, it's the best money I've ever spent. Because sometimes it just takes someone to say, why is the healthcare system set up this way, and why aren't we paying as much attention to the mental health side as we are the medical side? And I think it's time to start a conversation, to start offering the training, which is what we've done, and to make it, as Deborah Winger said, in terms of endearment, it's okay to talk about the cancer. So now, over the past year since you saw me last, in my 2-year journey, boy, life continues to happen to me too. I had my regular primary care doctor visit in November, and I'm, again, like many of you other breast cancer survivors, are on that awful, evil wonder drug, tamoxifen, which messes with your hormones. And I cried through the whole appointment. And my primary care doctor, who is a wonderfully busy man, he said, "I don't know what to do for you, but here's a prescription for an antidepressant." And I appreciated that, and I said, "I'll take that under advisement." I knew I needed to adjust my diet. I've done all of that, made a lot of changes, but it was just frightening to see that this, after everything that's happened here and that we're doing with COPE, this is still happening to me. The other bonus for me is I had 6 lymph nodes removed from my left armpit, and so now I get to wear the Michael Jackson glove, and this is part of the spring 2017 Diane fashion collection. It's just one of those reminders of what I've been through, and that this poor body has been racked by countless amounts of drugs, but I'm still a fighter. I still believe more now than ever that those of us who are survivors and caregivers and those who are impacted by anyone with cancer have a voice, and it's okay to talk about this. And I encourage you, and I ask and beg and plead for all of you to please be ambassadors, to say, for those who have the types of cancers that there are effective treatments, that it is survivable, that it is so important to think about the type of life after cancer. And so thank you for, and I encourage you to be ambassadors to help us spread the word that there are resources available. We would ask that all of you to be ambassadors, and there's a couple ways to do that. I believe there's a sign-up sheet out in the registration desk. If you would like to volunteer in any way, one of my next projects in my journey with this is to advocate more, and I've been harping about policy changes, or enforcing the laws that are already in the books when it comes to healthcare and parity. And we're going to start chipping away at that here very soon. The other way is to go to the COPE website and sign up through the Get Involved tab. So anyway, I again just want to give you a heartfelt thanks for being here, for your interest. I know many of you who are my friends are still struggling even years and years after your formal treatment is over. And I just want you to know that we are human beings. We're not freaks, we're not guinea pigs, and we're not pincushions. We have fears. This is a traumatic thing to go through, and it stays with you for a lifetime. And so please know that you're here surrounded. I send you all a virtual hug. And my thanks to the students, the COPE students, and those of you who are caregivers, both in the medical profession and as family caregivers. I thank you so much. Cancer is something that is survivable. We have to keep working at it, but if we do that together, we can succeed. Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you to Diane one more time. Thank you for sharing your story, and I feel so grateful that none of this would be possible without you, and it's just really such a wonderful gift. I also wanted to just briefly mention that Diane was named to the national list of 100 top businesswomen to keep an eye out for. So not only do we get to benefit from her involvement with COPE, we get to learn some of the business skills, which I didn't learn about. That's something psychologists don't do a very good job of. So I just appreciate learning from her and working with her and all of the insight that she offers us. Have a couple other quick thank yous to mention, and I just want to also thank Chancellor Rebecca Chop, who had to leave, as well as the University of Denver for their support of COPE. This is just a phenomenal support that we're getting from the university, and it's really great to have that and to have the backing of everyone here. I also want to thank Dean Shelley Smith Acuna for her support, her innovation, her creativity. She's heard me talk about this for a long time. I think I mentioned it at my interview about 5 years ago, and she's heard me ramble about the importance of psychosocial oncology for 5 years every chance I get. So I appreciate her vision and her support as well. I want to thank Dr. Helen Coons, who's a dear friend, and I want to thank her for her incredible help in organizing this event. Also for all the work you do nationally to help promote health psychology. She's very active, and we're so lucky to have her here in Denver doing this work. Also, just one more quick thank you to our panelists. What an amazing panel. So please, round of applause.
Yeah, you guys are awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories, for your vulnerability, and just for being here with all of us tonight. So appreciated. I also want to thank all of the students who are here and helped volunteer. Students, raise your hands over there. They're gathered around that table there. Their passion for this work is incredible and inspiring and really helps me love showing up for work every day to get to work with that wonderful group of students. I have the absolute best job in the world. I feel so lucky. It's thanks to these amazing students and my wonderful GSPP colleagues, many of whom are here tonight, and the wonderful staff as well. It's just a wonderful group to be a part of. I want to give a quick thank you to Lindsay Anderson, who's back there. There's Lindsay. Thank you to Lindsay for her help. Thank you to Ashley Halico, who's hiding in the back corner back there. And also to the amazing, I'm going to say magical, Stephanie Walton, who put all of this together and who seamlessly handles events, just a million events a year, I think is what it feels like. But she's the behind-the-scenes person who really helped make this possible, though. So thank you, Stephanie. I have to give a quick thank you to Michael Furman, who's our photographer over there. Michael was the only person other than my husband who attended my wedding, so thank you, Michael. We eloped this past summer, and Michael was our photographer, so get your picture taken by Michael before you leave. Thanks also to the Sodexo staff, and please enjoy some more food and drinks before you leave. Great food and great chance to continue to mingle. And lastly, I want to thank my friends and family who are here, a lot of them at this front table. My parents drove through a snowstorm in Iowa yesterday to be here, so I'm so appreciative of that. I also want to thank my Aunt Rosemary, who's here, and her work as a social worker throughout her career really helped influence my career direction. And also my husband, Ben, who's over here. He listens to me talk about COPE, helps me strategize on our nightly walks, and helps wipe some tears sometimes when this work gets difficult. So thank you to all of them as well. So as you've heard tonight, there's a great need for professionals to provide psychological and emotional support for cancer patients. And I just want to mention, when people find out that I specialize in working with cancer patients, you can probably imagine that reaction is, oh, that sounds awful. Why do you do that? But I hope that you've gotten a glimpse as to how meaningful this work is by hearing these stories tonight, by listening to the amazing and life-changing experiences that everybody gets to share. So I feel quite the opposite. I feel honored, I feel lucky to get to do this work, and even more fortunate to now be involved with training the next generation over there of psycho-oncologists. So very fortunate to get to do this. You can probably tell that I'm pretty passionate about this work. I'll probably be here for the next couple of hours bending your ear about these topics. And I think it really helps me when I hear stories like what we've heard tonight, be more grateful, help me with my priorities. As you can tell from my long list of thank yous, that's certainly not exhaustive, that I think it really helps you have gratitude in your life to be able to talk with cancer patients and caregivers. And just to mention really quickly, the mission of COPE is to provide excellent clinical training to graduate students. And we are the first training program, as you've heard, that offers these opportunities, to psychology students at the graduate level. We are so thankful that COPE launched about a year ago. And to just give you 2 seconds of an update, we have had a phenomenal year. We had 22 students enrolled in the first class in the sequence in the fall. We have 9 students currently working with cancer patients and caregivers in our on-campus clinic. And just this week, the demand for our clinical services is increasing. We added 3 more students and a new supervisor. And I think we're going to have to keep adding many more students who are jumping at the chance to do this work. Students are working at field placements in cancer centers all over the metro area. Thanks to some of you at the back table, many of you who are here who help with that training. So thank you for being involved and helping to facilitate that. I'm working on some research. Students are doing doctoral papers, and we're hoping to continue doing research in this area. So if you'd like to hear more about that, those students at that table, wave your hands if you're willing to be an ambassador for COPE. They will be willing to speak with you if you have questions, if you have comments and want to spend a little bit of time talking with them. We hope you'll continue to mingle, enjoy food and drinks, and sign up for that bone marrow registry. Thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight and for sharing in this really meaningful evening, and for your support of COPE. We really appreciate it.